Hi, everybody. I'm Donna from Wellbeing Australia, and please welcome today Desleigh White, who's the founder of People Matter Leadership Coaching. Hi, Desleigh. How are you doing?
Good morning, Donna. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Firstly, Desleigh, I wondered if you could just quickly introduce yourself to our audience and just give a little bit of your background.
Sure. As you said, I founded People Matter Leadership Coaching. I've also held a lot of senior HR or people and culture roles in different industries. So everything from engineering to animals and for purpose, not for profit, etc. So variety of experiences, and I love to learn. So that's kind of the segue into what we'll talk about today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us today, Desleigh. We really appreciate it. I saw a post that you made on LinkedIn this week that caught my eye and attention, which seemed to be a really interesting deck of cards speaking about emotions. And I think you referred to it as the emotional culture deck.
Mhm.
Um, I'd love to find out a little bit more about it. What's the origin of this deck and where does it come from?
So it comes out of New Zealand, interestingly, and a guy that I've met, Jeremy Dean, he created it sort of as a bit of a side thing to some work he was doing around customer experience. And essentially, it highlights the fact that we don't leave our emotions at the door when we come to the workplace. We don't leave them at the door when we go to a family event or in any aspect of our life. And so the deck is a very, very flexible tool to use to unpack how we feel, how we don't want to feel, how we would like our people to feel in the workplace, how we would prefer them not to feel in the workplace. And of course, the way we operate, the culture that we have in a team, in an organization, it all impacts our productivity, it impacts business results, so it's a very simple tool, but it's such a powerful tool.
Fantastic. Well, it looks very simple, but the words on it really caught my attention. I think there were such powerful, expressions of emotion. So, Desleigh, how would you use it? How would you introduce this as a tool in the workplace?
It depends very much on the purpose, Donna. So if I'm using it in a one-on-one session, a coaching session, I might ask someone to pick up the black cards, and I love that they're black. The words that we want to feel are the black cards,
Mm.
whereas often we have the negative stuff being associated with the black color. So often I'll have someone say, "Well, go through the cards and pick out how you want to feel in this context if we're talking about a particular topic." And they might come up with that they want to feel energized.
Mm.
And so that was one card that I picked this morning for myself around my leadership presence and how I want to be as a leader, and how I aspire to be as a leader. And so I want to feel energized. And then the conversation progresses to, well, what do I need to do in order to feel energized?
Mm.
And we can unpack that. Or, I can do it by myself,
Yeah.
just literally with the cards. So for me, about feeling energized is being interested in what I'm doing, being a bit creative, making sure that I'm going for my daily walk with the dogs. So if they bark, that's my segue into if my dogs bark, they're here. So yeah, it's very flexible. But then of course, it's not about toxic positivity. There are emotions we don't want to feel. And
Mm.
so one of the words that I picked this morning, I don't know if you can see that, overwhelmed. I
Mm.
don't want to
Mm.
feel overwhelmed in my work. I've felt that way in the past in jobs, and it's a very challenging spiral to get into and more challenging to get out of. So what do I need to do in order to not feel overwhelmed? Then I
Mm.
can sit and unpack that, or the person I'm coaching can sit and unpack that. And the beauty of
Fantastic.
doing it in a coaching conversation is I can challenge them to rethink things,
Mm.
and really progress that. Well, how might you do that? How else? In those conversations.
Fantastic. Wow. And do you generally get people to present or pick some of the black cards as well as the white cards in a session?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we understand that emotions are a balance of things we want to feel and things we don't want to feel, ideally. But the way Jeremy positions this is these are the words, these are the emotions that we don't want to feel, but we might from time to time. So we want to normalize that it's normal to sometimes feel overwhelmed. That's
Mm.
not the end of the earth. It's about what we do about that.
Right, right. And so how would you lead then into that conversation? Because I can imagine this would raise quite a few important issues, and it's an important conversation to have. And within the workplace, how far would you take that? What would be your conversation, or how would you coach somebody through that?
I think it depends very much on the workplace. My apologies, technology dings. Um, it depends very much on the workplace and who I'm working with as to how deep they want to go, or um, or that it's safe for them to go. I think it's
Mm,
really important that we remember I have a privilege
mm,
in my education, in my upbringing, in everything. I have a level of privilege that makes it safer for me, perhaps, to be vulnerable with this than some other people might have. And
right.
so, really tailoring it to the specific situation is important. I've run sessions with engineers on how do you want to feel at work, and I thought there's going to be a lot of silence in this room because we have perceptions about people, in particular professions. They blew me away. They were so engaged in this, and the thing
Wow.
I love about it is, we can position it as, sure, this is about work. Let's talk about work today, but keep in the back of your mind that you can also use this at home. So,
Yes.
the conversation over the dinner table, when was the last time we felt fun loving as a household?
Yeah.
And having those really important conversations where people can contribute, because the cards have this really weird kind of effect. Because it's a card, I'm putting it out there.
Mm,
I don't have to say I feel overwhelmed, and it becomes a very emotive thing.
yeah.
It's sort of externalized in some way because I've got this card that I can show.
Right.
It's fascinating psychology. I'd love to dig into it more, but beyond this session, perhaps.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We should definitely schedule that because I agree with you. And I think that it then, I suppose it's because you're picking one that it's not that something that you necessarily take ownership of owning that emotion, but it's something that somebody else might say, yeah, I also feel that way. And
Mm,
once it's there for somebody else to potentially choose as well, it makes it much less of a, I suppose, personal discussion
yeah,
necessarily as I own this and only I can own this and I feel this way. It's, well, we all feel overwhelmed from time to time. I'm not feeling that today, or yes, I'm also feeling that in this context. So fascinating.
yeah. I also have a pre-session with whoever is the leader of the team, particularly if they're going to participate, and I ask them not to jump in too quickly.
Mm,
Because it can shut down conversation when people jump in when they're the leader.
mm,
But I do say to them, if I call on you to start, then I'd like you to jump in.
okay.
And that way, they're role modeling the vulnerability of talking about this stuff.
Very useful, because I think we need more of that
Mhm.
in today's world. Is the sense of real conversations that allow people to express how they're feeling and feel heard and understood, um, as opposed to well, the leaders don't talk about their own emotions. It's
Mm.
just you know a culture of silence.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's an important aspect of leadership, absolutely.
Mm.
And so, Desleigh, would you use these? It sounds like one-on-one as well as in group sessions. Another way I'm thinking of potentially you could use it as you go through is with a leader who wants to understand how the team feels about their leadership or the culture that they're creating. Have you used it in that instance, and what have been some of the experiences?
It's actually designed to be used in that way.
Okay,
So it comes with the card deck. So it's literally a deck of cards. So you can see there, and it comes with instruction cards. So step one, and step one is how do we want our people to feel at work?
right.
So this is the work I would do with the leader. Like, how do you want them to feel at work? Now, if they say I want them to feel overwhelmed, we've picked up the wrong wrong side of the cards. Um, but we can make the links between the productivity, how people feel, all of that sort of stuff. And even if they say, Jeremy has this great example where someone has said, I don't care. It's like awesome, great start, thank you. Uncaring, that's a good start. So
Mm,
people, people do care how their people feel, and they also you can bring it back to, well, what do you want your leadership shadow or your leadership light to be for your
right.
team? So the one side of that is the how do we want our people to feel at work? If you can see that.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a bit hard with my blur on. And then
Yes.
the other side is how do I want to feel at work?
Right.
So often, in order to progress to a group session, we might start with a one-on-one session,
Great. Yes.
and that gets that leader familiar with the cards, and unpacking stuff, and it can be a bit of an aha moment for
Mm,
people.
mm,
Um, and the thing I love is sometimes you have the wildest differences,
mm.
and sometimes you have just incredible similarities.
Yeah.
And both are really interesting, and both are really important.
Fantastic. And why is that? Well, how would you take that then if they are wildly different? For example, as a coach in the workplace or working with a leader and a team who clearly have very different impressions of that environment and the culture and the leadership style, how do you then take that forward? How would you broach that?
Again, it's always so dependent on the group of people.
Mm,
Um, I think for me, I call it out and say,
mhm,
"Wow, this is so interesting." Like we are as a group, and it's always we language. We're so different. So let's unpack what those differences are and how we might leverage the differences
mm.
so that they become, this core group strength. Um,
Right,
because you often find that underneath the word, so if I choose playful as a word, playful means different things to different people.
right.
So it's about unpacking what that means in practice for
Mm,
people.
mm,
What does it look like if you're playful? And some people will say, "Oh, I play initiation pranks on people." And we have that conversation about safety and psychosocial risk and things like that. Other people go, "I love to tell a good joke." And then we have that conversation. Or it's just, I love to just have fun with my colleagues, whatever that might look like, a bit of banter over lunch. So, such wildly different variations on what that one word might mean to
mm,
people.
mm. And I think it probably also raises the question of people's expectations coming into the workplace.
Mm.
And, I think different generations, different experiences might have very different expectations of what a workplace is going to be like. Especially if they're just coming out of uni or have, been and worked in very playful or different environments in the past. So that could be, I would imagine, a good segue into discussing um, expectations as well.
Yeah,
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 great.
and I think often it brings to the fore that, we often talk about generational differences, boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, etc. But I've been looking at that and thinking, I was not that different to Gen whatever we're up to now. When I was their age, like I wanted those things as well, and I think we forget that.
Yeah.
And so the cards can actually bring a level of commonality to the conversation as well.
Mm, agreed. And I think the other thing is it's so important to reflect, I guess, on how you're feeling. And in the
Mm.
busyness of life and work, and especially for leaders to be able to reflect on their leadership style. I imagine it's a great catalyst for those conversations, but also that development in a leader, which is so important, especially if they are new or aren't particularly reflective. Have you used it in that way before and with good
I
effect?
I use it for myself
Yeah.
personally. So
Mm,
I like this morning I grabbed the cards out and went, well, how do I want to be as a leader? Because I'm doing some study at Charles Sturt, and one of the assignments is reflective practice. And so I need to start for my assignment, I need to think about how I want to be as a leader. But separately, particularly if I'm having a really bad day or week, I'll
mm,
grab the cards out and go, right, I don't want to feel overwhelmed. I don't want to feel disheartened. So, what can I do for me, or what can I engineer to have happen for me, where I don't feel those things,
mm,
or I feel less of those things? Because, we're going to feel them, right? So, it's just about less than. Or I might be, I want to feel more compassion. So, what do I need to do in order to be more compassionate?
yeah.
And often it comes down to the most simple things, like I need to just stop scrolling social media, or I need to stop doing something while I have my morning coffee, which is a bit of a ritual on my back deck, or I need to stop trying to multitask and actually just do one thing and do it well. So it can be a really good self-reflective tool as
Mm,
well.
fantastic. Wow, that sounds incredible. It's got so many uses
Mm,
and value, and I think it should be, by the sounds of it, in every manager's toolbox for, especially in the current context of psychosocial safety in the workplace.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
I've done sessions with teams where I was hearing murmurings of the team not being okay,
mm,
feeling left of center, particularly during COVID.
yeah,
And even after COVID, because at the end of the day, we're not yet recovered from
yeah.
the pandemic. We're still working through all of the complexity that held. And so the cards are a really useful tool of sort of almost distancing ourselves from that emotion within the team environment, but still owning it. It's very, very interesting, as I said.
Fascinating. Which raises, I think, my next question, Desleigh, is when would you introduce the cards as a tool within a group? Is there the right time or place, or is it good to, schedule quarterly or twice a year for a team or a leader to go through them? How do you find they are used in different ways?
I'm not nearly that structured, Donna.
Okay.
Um, I use them when it feels right.
Okay.
So for instance, I recently had a new manager who, like, new manager to the team, very well established team. They loved their previous manager, who was still in the organization. So it had that complexity to it of that we want him, not him. And they were both male. But I used it with them. We did an in-person session because they were disconnected. There were some behaviours that were going on that struck us, the manager and I, as the team are not doing so well. They're not communicating well. We need to bring people together. We need to connect in person. Let's have an off-site. He also wanted to achieve some things, and so I said, "No, don't tell them what they have to do, because if we tell people what they have to do, they're not going to do it.
Right.
But if we invite them to participate, they're going to share what their challenges are." And so I convinced him. He's a new manager, and I was sort of coaching and mentoring him, which was made it a bit easier. But I said, "I promise you, I will deliver your results. Give me half a day with them." And so I got my 3 hours with them, and I got his results in the first 30 minutes.
Wow.
So
Wonderful.
it was really powerful, and I don't want to sort of unpack that any more than that for confidentiality reasons. But I actually wonder as well, separately, we're seeing a lot in the media about different organizations saying, hey, everyone has to come back into the office 3 days a week. And I actually think the emotional culture deck is a perfect tool to go, how do you want to feel at work? I don't want to feel overwhelmed. Well, when do you feel overwhelmed? When all this stuff is coming at me and I can't talk to someone. Well, when could you talk to someone? Oh, well, I could talk to someone if I was in the office. And then you make it their idea that they want to come into the office and be together, which builds all sorts of positive emotions, reduces the negative emotions. And it's not manipulative because you're actually asking them how they want to do it. You're not actually telling them.
Mm. Mm.
Um, but it's a level of deep hearing and listening that you won't get by just having a conversation.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Well, it sounds like a powerful tool. And Desleigh, anything else that you wanted to discuss about them today that we haven't covered yet?
One of the things I really like about it, and I've been on the fence. I attend I think it's a monthly professional development session using the cards, and at the last one we did, they said pick a random card from both packs, and talk about when you last felt that. So I just picked helpful randomly, um, and we talked about the last time we felt helpful.
Mm.
And it's a really interesting way to reflect on your career, or your home life, or whatever it is, and look at, well, is that a feeling that's important for me?
Mm.
So if I was job hunting, for instance, I might do a couple of those rounds of that exercise to go, okay, what is important to me? Appreciated. When did I last feel appreciated?
Right.
Um, so it's a very interesting self-reflective tool, as well as an organization or household or friend group kind of tool.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds incredible. And Desleigh, do you know where people get hold of them? Or we could probably put a
Yeah,
link.
I can send you a link
Okay.
to it. It's as I said, Jeremy's in New Zealand, and he's just done amazing work with this tool. So kudos to him.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure our viewers would love to get hold of them. They sound fantastic. And thank you so much for spending some time with us over morning coffee and discussing how you best use these. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Donna. Thank you.
Thank you.